This is Luke coming at you again from the shop. So this is the bike that's getting the EFI swap. Let me give you some backdrop story on myself and the bike. So I started doing the on forums years ago. I did a bunch of documentations on how to do certain swaps on these bikes. So let me touch up on what's done. So I did a forum thread called 401 or 405 cc's the sneaky way on originally a 350 Wolverine forum that now has been merged into yfm350.com. There's also a thread on how I did the two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive electronic conversion, which uses all parts from a 02 to 06 Big Bear. And so now it's two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, depending on how I'm feeling. It's got GBC 6-ply radials on it. And yes, it is 405 cc strokes. It's about 11 and a quarter, one compression. It made 31 horsepower to the tire on a car dyno. So it was spinning about 1,000-pound load, which is way more than, well, unless you put 5 of me on it, than I would ever actually see in real life. So that was probably a bit much, but you know, it's good to know that even under the highest loads, you're not going to have detonation or any issues, and the horsepower is consistent, which it is. This thing's an absolute riot. It's also had the Big Bear gearbox swap. So basically you swap all the gears. There's a couple ways. You can do an individual 4 or 5 gear swap with a Wolverine trans, or you can do the Big Bear gear swap with just all the gears and the trans. But if you do that, you got to remember to swap in the shift drum with it. I found that out after the fact. So for a while, I had an upside down 4 or 5. 1, 2, 3 were normal, but 4 and 5 swap from the Big Bear to the Wolverine. I don't know why Yamaha thought they had to do that, but they did. But so this bike will, if you ran this bike out, it will, in third gear, it'll hit 11,000 RPM with the way the motor's built. Sounds like a 450 bike, wraps real hard, lots of power, runs great. So that's a real fast and dirty backdrop on the bike. So what are we going to do here? So, well, this is what I've been showing people here for a little while now. This is the early style cover. You notice the smaller diameter, doesn't have a bolt-on pattern here for the pull start, which, let's see, I think I have one flopping around here somewhere. Nope. So, normally, if you took off that center cover, so you can see that this looks a little taller than normal, because this is also the part of the swap to a Big Bear crankshaft. You need to run the taller Big Bear jug, but all bolts right in on the stock mounts really quick and easy. But normally you can get a cover on these in later years right here, or even the earlier years could run this bigger cover, which is nice because you can upgrade the stator, and it costs a lot less money. So a 300 watt high output stator rewound by Rick's, or even getting one from RM, you're talking a $200 stator. This stator, if I had to replace the one in here right now, that's a $600 price point, and just not worth the hassle. So, but basically, this is what started it all, because I needed a way to mount a crank trigger. So why not make my own crank trigger? I'll probably have to do some things as this goes on, like extending the shift over just a little bit, just to make sure it doesn't, on the upstroke, I don't accidentally hit the gears. Or the other thought was, I'll build a new shift lever from here to here, and I'll just extend this ratio back here for a little bit more travel, which will shorten up the throw that I need at the front. So, and that's the idea, is I know this thing's horsepower bound by the small carburetor. Even though it's a 36 millimeter pumper carb, and that's about as good as you get when it's wide open, it's still the problem that it's not enough. So if you, like I said, I flowed this carburetor on my flow bench, and this carburetor flows about 121 CFM at 28 inches. And if you divide 31 horsepower at the tire, even, you do the math to figure out what that equals. So 0.26 is a horsepower on a single cylinder, is a multiplication. So if you back figure that, this thing's moving over 130 CFM right now. So this carb is maxed. I mean, it's very responsive. It actually drives like a kitten because of that, but it's too much. It's limiting me on the top end. And I bet you once I get this done, get it back over to the dyno, we're probably going to see a 2 to 3 horsepower gain and more power up top, because basically this carburetor is all done at 7 grand. It cannot, it chokes it off. And you can, we'll just watch the graph hit 7 grand and just sit there. It holds 7, holds 8, and the horsepower really doesn't move. And then finally you hit a point in the RPMs where it finally, because it just keeps pulling. Like I said, on the dyno I've had as high as 11,000 RPM. So, and then finally at 11,000, yeah, it's dropping off. At 10,000, it's dropping off pretty good, but not as much as you would think. So that tells me the biggest issue is that I cannot get the airflow to it to keep making power where it's plateauing off, because it does it for so long. And I know what the cylinder head flows, so I also know that there's more potential in this easily. So, and eventually I have another stroker crank for this that's going to go in. It's a 75.5 millimeter stroke with a Carrillo rod. So that's going to take this out to 427 cc or 426 right around. And that should add even more power when the time comes. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking to maybe break, when I do that, I'm hoping to get around 38 to the tire. So pretty stout little machine. But like I said, this thing is great. It's a great smooth road, smooth trail bomber. Rides great, but when you start hitting rough stuff, that carburetor, the float starts bouncing, you're getting surge, lean, rich, lean. And with a motor that's kind of ragged edge like this, I don't like that. And that's the whole point of this fuel injection swap on this particular buggy. I have a 73 Challenger. I'm also doing a Mega Squirt 3 swap on. That might come later. Probably next winter you'll see me putting some videos up about that. But basically, this one is just to document how to do it on anything, even a motorcycle. So recycle, that's rule number 1. Cam and crank is sorted, because with this cover I can get a cam sensor in here somewhere, and I have an aftermarket I have a vernier caliper, so I can dial in the exact amount of advance or retard, which this is currently set up 2 degrees advanced. And from not Webcams, Megacycle makes it for these still. So, and on that, I'm going to make it, drill some holes and bolt on a reluctor wheel of sorts that I can use to read that off. So it's just going to be a simple 180 on, 180 off. So circle, half of it will be, if it's a 1/2 inch from top to bottom, half of it's going to be a 1/4 inch and the other half is going to be a 1/2 inch. So you get 180 degrees basically of high voltage, 180 of low voltage. And then the nice thing is, because this is a vernier caliper, it's got multiple holes drilled through it already. All I really have to do is figure out where to place that, thread them, put it there, and bolt it right on, and it's not going anywhere. And then all I gotta do is remake a cover. I could even reuse this one if the cast will clean up and weld decent enough. I could reuse this cover here and just weld the bung into it. So all depends on how I want to go about it. So next question is, well, this is an air-cooled bike, where I'm going to put a coolant sensor, right? There's a couple options that I could do. I could cut out some of these excess tubes on the head and the back where there's not much airflow, and I could put a bung in, and that will thread in there, so that heat will transfer into it, and that'll give me a reading. Or I could go off the radiator up here in the front, and or off the housing down there where it comes out of the engine for the cooler. I am going to upgrade the cooler to a bigger one. I do have a Big Bear one floating around somewhere that's considerably larger and has a small fan mounted on it. So, forced oil cooling would be good on this, I think. And then I could just use that sensor for when it's going to flick on the oil cooler. And that's probably the best thing to do, is actually go off oil temperatures and just have it cool that whenever it needs. Because you keep the oil cooler, well, everything else is going to be happier too. So yeah, sweet little ride. It's a blast. It absolutely rips. I mean, and it'll do with the re-gearing. I can easily do 65 mile an hour. And what's really the best thing about doing the re-gear swap, for anyone who is curious, or the 4.7 swap, or the Big Bear Trans swap, whatever you want to call it, is that you can do 35, 40 mile an hour and the motor is just cruising, happy as a pig in snot. Now, that also means you got to have a motor that's making enough power to be worth that it can actually do it happily. So, I wouldn't recommend it on a bone stock machine with a wet clutch. But being that I've shaved so much load off what this bike sees at the crankshaft, because it's 2-wheel drive when I need it to be, It just makes it so much easier on it. And basically what happens with that gear swap is that you have a normal 5-speed. You get a slightly, I did the Big Bear swap route, so I get a deeper first gear. So if I need to creep, it's a little bit steeper than your factory gear. You wouldn't really notice it to ride it probably if you didn't know any better. But you can hear it a little bit. It definitely winds out, but it's really nice if I got to creep or do something technical. 4-wheel drive, I could just creep and roll, and it's consistent that way. Second, third are really high, and even fourth gear now is a really good gear. Fourth gear is a lot longer in this bike than it used to be. So basically where you would run fifth gear before, you're now running fourth gear. So you get first, second, third, fourth, and fourth is even in like 35 mile an hour out on a smooth woods trail, I can still rip the hides off the back end. It'll just spin these tires up, no problem. Drift every corner, it's a blast. And then when you are riding on a more open trail, you're doing a big field, or you're going down some back roads, your long straight trails, some old fire roads, man, put it in fifth gear. If you want to go real fast, you can, but it's just so nice to be able to put it in fifth gear and just bring that motor down to a sane RPM and just let it be happy. So look forward to seeing some more work here shortly. By the next time you see it, I'm still recovering, but you know, I'm not going to sit around doing nothing for 3 months of my life. So that's the idea. Everyone who's watching the video, thank you. Take care. And if you're curious about how to do things, you can learn something here. I might not be some big somebody, but I'm not nobody. All right. Bye.